What's going on, everybody? My name is Nick.
My name is Dave.
And this is the Deep Dive, and we are in our second week of this Christmas Advent series that we're doing called The Gift of Presence. And today we're talking about peace. We're kind of going along with the Advent candle, or
Wreath,
candles, with the candles. And yeah, it'll be good. I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, let's do this one.
Yeah, let's go. All right, Dave. Well, we are back on a Sunday. There was football yesterday. I know last time I was like, it was on a Friday. How can we do this? But we can talk a little bit. But really, it was just there was great championship Sunday.
Yeah, this is, if you've never watched this before, this is the sports part of our
podcast.
Yeah, it was, I'm riding the Georgia train as long as it will go.
Yeah.
But they looked great. And we might have to beat Texas 3 times.
That would be insane.
Yeah.
Because that was the predicted setup right now, is that we'd play whoever won between Texas and whoever they're playing.
And for any Clemson fans, I didn't think that a game could be more exciting than that Georgia Tech game.
Yeah.
But the finish of that Clemson SMU game with that field goal was just unreal. If you haven't seen it, go on YouTube and Google it, because the guy kicked a 56-yard field goal with, walk-off field goal to win the game.
Crazy
So anyway,
stuff. Well, let's jump into it. Like I said, this is our second week in this Advent series that we're doing. And today you talked about peace, and I'm excited to kind of hear your breakdown a little bit of it, but then also dig a little deeper into it.
Sure. Well, the setting is that peace is one of those words you hear a lot at Christmas time. Peace on earth, right? Mm-hmm. Peace on earth, goodwill to men. So peace is a part of the Christmas story from the text, both from the Old and New Testament. But it's also kind of a testimony of Jesus. Jesus in the Beatitudes said, that blessed are the peacemakers, for they should be children of God. Jesus said, my peace I leave with you. Not as the world knows peace, but the peace that comes from me. And so the question, as you look around the world, is where is the peace? Because it doesn't seem like there's a lot of peace.
Right.
And I would say there's not a lot of biblical peace out there. We sometimes, and this was part of my point, that I think we get confused on what peace is.
Yeah.
I think peace is just the absence of war or the absence of conflict.
Right.
And so, someone like me, I'm kind of wired up to avoid conflict.
Yeah.
And I would tell you, if I'm in a situation where lots of times I will try to diffuse it by using humor or something like that, or memorializing what's going on at time. And that's not making peace either. That's not being a peacemaker either.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do. I mean, it's something that we've actually had the opportunity to work through together at times with some conflicts and stuff like that. And
not between you and me, but
not between us, but with just other things going on.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Like, I tend to be one of those guys that, like, I look at it, but sometimes I'll take too long to figure out my solution. And sometimes I need to act faster when it comes to it.
Yeah. And I think there's some practical things about it that I couldn't get into the sermon, is that, like, if we're going to be peacemakers, we need to approach it understanding the timing of it. Because when someone is escalated, is not the time to try to come in and we can de-escalate it, but it's not the time necessarily that people are in their headspace to make peace or to even think about it. So anyway, I looked at one passage. Had you ever heard that story before?
The Abigail story?
Yeah.
You know what? It's actually been a really long time. I've heard it. I think I did a study that referenced it at one point, but it's been a while.
I think it's not that probably a lot of women who have done that women's Bible study where they do women heroes surely have studied Abigail.
Hope so.
But it's not one of those stories that we land on a lot, because there's so many good stories around that in 1 Samuel, with David and Saul and
David kind of seems to overshadow a lot of that area in the Bible.
Right. But I used her as an example of a peacemaker. Mm-hmm. And so if you don't know the story, I'll try to tell it.
Cliff notes.
Quick cliff notes of it. But it was during the time Saul was the king at the time. David had been anointed to be king, and this is upsetting to Saul, and it should be. I mean, Saul had fallen away from the leader that he once was for God,
right?
And so God was going another way with David, and Saul got very, very jealous and angry, and he kind of put a price on David's head. I mean, David is basically living as a fugitive. He's out in the wilderness. Sometimes he's in caves. He's running for his life. But also, he had a group of men with him. David already was popular. People were recognizing his leadership and that, he was going to eventually be the king. So, he had his followers. He had, I think the scripture says 600 men that were out there with him.
Right.
And so he's in this wilderness. And, of course, you got 600 people to take care of. You got to have provisions. You got to have water. You got to have food and supplies. And so they're out there and they're hungry and they're tired, and David's a little amped up because you can imagine running for your life. And so where they were was real close to where this guy named Nabal lived, and Nabal was a very wealthy person. The best description I would have, the Bible doesn't call it this, would be a rancher. Okay. He had lots of animals and people that worked for him. So David is, he's out there and, he's just looking for solutions. And so this Nabal guy who had, lots of money and lots of resources, it was a time of year when they sheared the sheep. So he's about to have a windfall again. And so David thinks, well, we've been out here and, first of all, we didn't take any of these sheep even though we were hungry. And we've kind of taken care of these guys and sort of watched over them, giving them security. Right. And so maybe they'll help us out. So he sends some guys to go to Nabal's house and say, could you help us out? We're out there and remind him that we kind of took care of your men when they were out there. And Nabal's a real jerk. And he says, no, I'm not going to do that. Who is this David? No, we don't owe you anything. And so word gets back to David. David goes insane. He's like, I can't believe that guy. He said, get your swords. I'm taking 400 of you and your swords, and we're going to go to their household, and we're going to kill every man, woman, and child. It's going to be a bloody battle. Everybody's going to be dead. And so a little bit of an overreaction.
Yeah, just a little.
And a little out of character for David, too.
From the David pretty chill.
Yeah. So they set on their way. Abigail, who's Nabal's wife, who is described as being very beautiful and being very wise, she hears of this. And so she takes initiative. First of all, she gathers up supplies and things that they need, and she gets some own donkeys and gets some people with her, and they go out to meet David on his way there with all of his men with their swords.
Ready to go.
And she kneels down and, she has this conversation with him where she says, hey, my husband is a jerk. You got to understand that. This total paraphrase, but my husband is a jerk, but David, you are the person, you fight the Lord's battles, and, I want to, make good on this. So here are the provisions. And David, when this story is told, this is not the way you want the story to be told. Right? You don't want it to be told this way. No. You're better than that, David. Yeah. Now, that's a real paraphrase. Just from in the sermon, I actually read the scripture, but that's essentially what she's saying. Right. She is appealing to David's better self, and David's future self, and say, David, this is not the story you want to get around of how you came in and massacred a family because they didn't give you any bread and water. And David hears, and he calms down, and he sends her on her way and wishes her peace. And so I just feel like that's a model for peacemaking. First of all, she took initiative. She didn't avoid it. She acknowledged the harm that had been done. She says, David, I know how much it must be, running for your life. She empathizes with him. And then, she appeals to his future self and says, David, this is not the way you want this story to be told. Right. And David hears her. And so that's such a great example for us in the way that, we can be peacemakers in the world too. I think, we got to have the courage to confront when there is something going on, but to do it with humility, to do it with wisdom, to do it with empathy.
Yeah.
To extend that kind of grace is how we make peace in the world.
Right. And I think something, as you look at it practically and stuff like that, something else, and you said it right at the beginning, but is the fact that she took the initiative and headed it off. I think there's sometimes when we come around conflict or stuff that's going on in our world that just brings us uneasiness or whatever, that oftentimes we're just kind of like, maybe it'll just go away. Maybe if we just turn away from it for a while, like it'll just settle itself out. But she kind of took matters into her own hands and kind of said, like, I'm going to go be humble. I'm going to go make something happen here. I'm going to do my best to make something happen.
Yeah.
Because could have easily been like, here's a good place to start. Whoosh, taking her down there. But she wanted to try to head it off as much as possible. And I think that's an important step when it comes to trying to resolve conflict or trying to bring peace is to not let the conflict get too far in.
Right. And and she was on a timeline too,
Yeah.
but lots of times I will feel like if there's a conflict, that if I just ignore it, it will go away. But it rarely does. It just festers and escalates when it's not addressed. So she did take it on. Another point would be that the reason I don't think we have peace is we have bought into this idea of the iron rule. We all know the golden rule.
Right.
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Right.
But more times than not, what we see modeled for us, and oftentimes we live out ourselves, is do unto others as they have done to you, or sometimes do unto others before they do to you.
Yeah.
And somehow or another we can justify that in our minds as that's okay. But what that does is just, it escalates things.
Yeah.
I quoted Martin Luther King Jr., who said, an eye for an eye just leaves us all blind.
Yeah.
And so even though that's in the Bible, it got corrected with Jesus because it doesn't do anything except just make the situation worse. And we may have the idea that it feels powerful, at the time where we feel like we're being savvy or worldly in doing that, but we're really only hurting ourselves and hurting the world.
I will say that is something that comes up quite often. But I was actually in service with one of my daughters today, and as you said that, she kind of looked at me and was like, "Oh." You know what I mean? Like it caught her a little bit because, how often, especially as kids, like, well, she did this first, so I wanted to do, so I got to do it too, or I was going to do it before you were going to do it, or you got mad before, you know what I mean? Like there's this back and forth.
Well,
and I think it's in our culture.
Well, I think it's in our, it's in our culture, but I also think it's sort of in our young selves, immature. I mean, children do that, right?
Yeah.
Bobby hit me. Bobby took my food, so I get to take it. That it's okay. It's not okay with children.
Trying to reason the fairness of
we
things.
have to be adults in the room.
Yeah.
And help them reconcile. The problem is the examples that we set as adults, and it seems worse than ever. When you've got politicians saying, "I will be your retribution."
Yeah.
We've normalized it. And it's not the way of Jesus.
Right.
We are to be peacemakers, and it's not going to solve the world's problems.
Yeah.
By doing to others as they've done to us or before. We do it by following Jesus's rules.
Yeah.
Great commandments.
The examples.
Yeah. So but it is. Last week we had some hard things to look at, but this week is even harder because I think the whole idea of forgiveness, it's so easy to say, do these things, but it's so difficult when people have been hurt.
Yeah.
And difficult when, something has caused a real wound. And this is not saying, at all that you should just take it, but we need to have some sort of resolution of how we're going to heal it.
Yeah. And I think you hit the head, especially earlier when it comes to this, is like the festering of things. Like if we wait too long, it just continues to get worse and harder to work through and stuff like that. And to be people of peace, I think it really takes us stepping up and kind of saying, okay, I see an injustice maybe in the world, or I see a place where I've hurt a friend or whatever, to really actually seek that forgiveness, but then also to have the action that follows it. You know?
I talked a little bit about holding grudges, and I don't think I'm one that does that, but I certainly know people who do. Really, really, they can hold a grudge. And I was reading the thing about mental health this week, and just the idea that we can't forgive this person, we're going to hold this grudge, because if not, it's letting them off, or it's it feels more powerful, I guess, to I'm mad and you wronged me. And
I think sometimes it's like people are seeking like some sort of justice that they never got, or what, like, does it make sense?
Right.
Like they're looking for that justice of like something wrong happened, something needs to make it right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, so it is to live this way, to live as peaceful people, is not an easy thing to do. And we're not going to get it right
every time.
But I do think that there is something about remembering Christ's birth, remembering, that this time, in with all the conflict and all the things that were going on, the Herod that was there and all the anxiety around that there can be a light that's shined into that darkness that does bring peace. Even if it's just a moment. I say this a lot, but every Christmas Eve when we light the candles and we sing Silent Night. I mean, in those moments, even if it's just a moment, there does seem to be peace on earth for that moment.
Especially like almost like as the music kind of fades out and there's just that moment where everybody stops for a second. And you're just like looking at the flame, looking at the light combining together. Do you know what I mean? Like
there's a sacredness in that if we can somehow get in touch to, and then be able to amplify and multiply that into the new year. And so, that's a couple of weeks away, but I do look forward to it. So
it's probably one of my favorite parts of a church service throughout the year. Like, I don't know, it's just good.
Yeah, it is. That time at Christmas Eve. I'll tell you another thing as we're getting to the close here today, is next Sunday is a Sunday that I always look forward to because that's the day the choir does the program. So there's no sermon to bore
Which is why he looks forward to not playing.
But I love hearing the Christmas music. That there's something about that. I was talking when Melanie was sick this week, so we were texting back and forth, planning worship. So I was giving him some ideas what my sermon was and everything, and then I kind of added at the end of the day. It was just like, above everything else, it's Christmas, and we get to sing the Christmas carols. So that's the most important thing, because we only get to sing them once a year, right? So let's enjoy that. Everything doesn't have to be on theme this week.
That's right. Just enjoy it, have a good time. Celebrating again, and I think we talked about this last week, is just celebrate in that busy time, like to give some sacred time to just sit back and go, to enjoy.
All right. Well, anyway, this is good. We'll next week. I don't know what we'll do next week, because we'll have
to figure that out.
Well, maybe talk about some of the stuff that's happening in the new year next.
We'll figure something out. But without anything else, if you got anything that you guys want to add to the comments on our Facebook or YouTube, just drop it in there. Jim, I saw this past week, Jim Kleiman dropped a comment in there. Got a chance to reply and talk to him a little bit. So that was fun. And then, if you have anything that you'd like to add to this, or there's something special about the Christmas season that you really appreciate, anything like that, just drop it in there. Let's begin these conversations and just continue what we're talking about, because it's one thing if it just is something you listen to on a Sunday as a sermon or whatever, but these are things to apply to life, trying to becoming a peaceful person. And Dave said it earlier, you're not going to get it perfect every time, but that doesn't mean you don't try. That doesn't mean you don't try to work at it and learn from your mistakes or the places where maybe you see that you're causing the conflict, and how to come off of that a little bit. There's a lot of things that we can do in our lives to take what we're listening to and really try to apply it. So I think that's what we'd ask you to do at this point. And yeah. So next week we have the special choir. Is it a cantata? We're not really calling it a cantata.
I don't think so. I think Voices of Christmas or something like that is what they titled it. But there'll be lots of Christmas music. The kids are singing. There'll be some solos. It's always a high point of our Christmas around Hickory Flats. So it's a good chance to invite somebody to come to church.
Yeah.
There's
people all the time asking, like on Cherokee Connects, like, where can I hear some of the traditional Christmas music or
Right.
whatever? So
Yeah.
Invite a friend, invite your neighbor, all that good stuff. And yeah, well, Dave, we'll catch you guys next time, I guess. I've got nothing else to add.
Yeah, me either. God bless everybody.
All right, you guys take care. We'll see you next time.
Have a great week.